Discover the incredible moment when a cop slaps the chief judge, transforming justice forever. Officer Jake Barnes stood at the edge of the town hall, heart pounding, the tension in the room thick enough to cut with a knife. It was the night Cedar Hollow would stand at a precipice, a night that would redefine justice. He glanced at his children, Emily and Noah, wide-eyed in the crowd, their innocence a stark reminder of what he was fighting for. The air hummed with whispered frustration, pulses of anger thrumming against the walls, coiling tightly around every citizen who had gathered to confront an indifferent system. For years, Cedar Hollow had felt the grip of despair. Economic hardship had transformed neighbors into strangers, whispers of injustice permeating their everyday lives. Tonight, those whispers found their voice, amplified by the wrongful accusation against Tony, a beloved veteran who had dedicated his life to serving the country. The diner had buzzed with tales of his character, now marred by a single accusation. And standing in front of Judge Henry Sullivan, his toothy smile like a wolf hiding in sheep-esque clothing, was the embodiment of everything wrong in this town. As the judge spun empty rhetoric about law and order, Jake felt his resolve crumble beneath the weight of his uniform. He was a defender of the peace, a protector, yet he was witnessing the very fabric of that peace being ripped apart by a man more concerned with his power than with the truth. Memories of his father flashed before him, the long hours worked, the quiet discussions of morality and justice. Do what's right, even when it's hard, his father's voice echoed in his mind, urging him forward. In the moment that followed, Jake stepped forward, fueled by a tide of emotion, love for his children, heartbreak for his neighbors, and a simmering resentment towards the man before him. Before he knew it, his hand had connected with the judge's cheek in a swift, shocking arc. The slap rang through the crowd like a thunderclap, silence swallowing the room whole. Faces turned to wide-eyed disbelief, then to something else, something ignited. Jake's heart raced with fear and exhilaration, the same way he felt when he first held Emily and Noah. He had made a statement, a simple yet powerful declaration against the injustice that had festered too long. And in that visceral reaction, a fire had been lit among the townsfolk, an ember of unity born from Jake's boldness. The whispers shifted to shouts, anger fueling resolve as the people rallied together. Strangers reached across aisles, breaking barriers of class, race, and mistrust, sharing their stories of adversity, injustice, and the hope they still clung to. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. The atmosphere shifted, crackling with anticipation and shared determination. The anger that had bubbled beneath the surface finally erupted, urging everyone to fight for one another. Jake felt the weight of uncertainty press against him. The question lingering in his mind, had he just catalyzed a movement for change, or had he irrevocably altered his family's future? As he scanned the faces around him, a sense of hope ignited. Could one act of courage truly transform a community so deeply fractured? The answer hung in the air, a fragile promise waiting to be discovered. The roar of the crowd shook Cedar Hollow's town hall, a wave of adrenaline washing over Jake. He felt the energy latch onto him like a lifeline, pulling him along in a sea of shouted promises for justice. The shock from his slap still echoed in the judge's eyes, and Jake stood there, half in disbelief. He and T just slapped the judge. He had struck a nerve in an entire community. Mayor Lacey stepped up to the podium. Her voice cracked the din. "We are not here just for Tony. We are here for every single person this system has failed." The crowd erupted again, fists raised high, faces lit with newfound purpose. Jake's heart raced in tandem with the collective heartbeat of Cedar Hollow. It felt like a moment long overdue, a chance to stand up, to be heard. Emily pulled at his sleeve, gaze flickering between her father and the onstage mayor. "Dad's that okay?" she asked, eyes wide with uncertainty. Jake knelt down, meeting her gaze. "It's okay to stand up for what's right, Emily. Always." Noah chimed in, a flash of defiance in his small voice. "Yeah? We have to help Tony." Jake swallowed hard, knowing the risks they all faced, but unable to silence the undeniable truth blossoming in his heart. Together, they could forge a new path. Together, they could be stronger. The judge's face twisted in rage as he regained his composure, but the crowd wouldn't let him drown them out. "This isn't how justice works, officer. You'll pay for this." His threat fell flat. The people were no longer afraid. They flooded the space with cries for transparency, calls for accountability, and intentions to reclaim what was rightfully theirs. Jake could see the wave of defiance swelling, people rising in solidarity, and in that moment, he felt buoyed by a sense of hope that had long felt elusive. He knew the risks he'd taken could cost him his job, maybe even more, but the thought of those consequences lost meaning against the backdrop of a community ignited with passion. They continued to chant for justice. A staggering realization washed over him. The very thing he feared could become a reality. Displacement, strife, and loss could also be the catalyst for a new dawn in Cedar Hollow. A voice from the back cried, "If not now, when?" And it resonated deeply within the crowd. Their pain, their anger, would not remain unacknowledged any longer. The night simmered with promise as adults hugged children tightly, exchanging words of encouragement. Boundaries dissolved in unity, reminding everyone of their shared humanity. Jake straightened, feeling like a guard against the winds of despair that had howled for too long. But deep inside, he sensed the looming question: what would happen when the dust settled? Was this just an explosive reaction, or had they sparked a genuine movement for justice? In that charged atmosphere, Jake spotted Judge Sullivan waving his arms, demanding order, insisting the crowd disperse. But the stubborn roar grew louder, a rising crescendo of defiance drowning his words. As Jake met the judge's gaze, he could see the simmering fury mixing with fear that perhaps, after tonight, justice wouldn't remain on the judge's side. Would Cedar Hollow finally stir awake, or was this moment merely a flicker against the established order? The question lingered heavy in the air, urging Jake and the townspeople toward a wild hope as the walls around them trembled, and as the judge's voice became drowned out in the unity of their screams. Jake's heart opened to the potential that lay ahead both for him and for the people he had sworn to protect. But as the sun dipped lower, casting shadows across the town hall, one thing was certain: they were only just beginning to uncover the truth. What would be revealed next could shift the very foundation of their lives, for better or worse. Jake's heart thundered in his chest as the crowd surged, an unstoppable wave of conviction and defiance. He could feel the electricity in the air, coursing through him and igniting a fierce urgency to act. He glanced at Emily and Noah, who were perched on the edge of their seats, drenched in the fervor of the moment, their faces bright with resolve. "Let us do this," he whispered to them, the words barely escaping his lips. With one final glance at the judge, Jake turned to the people around him. "We need to fight for change," he shouted, and the crowd answered with a wild cheer. A chorus of voices swelling around him like a powerful tide, threatening to sweep away the barriers that had kept them divided for so long. Mayor Lacey raised her arms, channeling the energy. "This isn't just about our friend Tony. This is about every family in Cedar Hollow who has lived in fear of a corrupt system." The crowd roared again, and Jake felt a flicker of pride. They were no longer just friends and neighbors, they were allies united under a single cause. But as the fervor reached its peak, Jake felt a knot of anxiety twist in his stomach. There was little doubt that the path ahead would be fraught with challenges. He knew not just the judge, but the whole system was entrenched in years of tradition and power, and they wouldn't give it up easily. Suddenly, a sharp sound cut through the commotion. A gavel smack echoed from within the hall. "Order," Judge Sullivan called, struggling now to reel in the chaos. "This is unlawful." You are all obstructing the court." The words hung heavy in the air, a threat wrapped in the judge's palpable fear. Jake looked over at his children. Emily clutched Noah's hand, her eyes wide, seeking comfort. "What does he want us to do?" she asked, her small voice barely above a whisper. Jake knelt beside her, looking her squarely in the eye. "We can't back down now. They want us to be quiet. But we deserve to be heard, don't we?" She nodded, a flicker of determination igniting in her expression. Noah, emboldened by his sister, chimed in with fierce loyalty. "Stand up, Dad. We need to show them we won. Be silent." With a swift surge of courage pushing at his back, Jake rose. "If you want order, Judge, then let us start with accountability." His voice cut through the gathered masses, each word pounding with resolve. The crowd echoed his words, the energy swirling around them, pulling everyone together in solidarity. The judge paled, his expression a cocktail of disbelief and anger. "You'll regret this reckless uprising. The law will come down on you." Yet, throughout that claustrophobic space, with walls metered in whispers of fear, hope brimmed over. "You're outnumbered," someone from the crowd shouted, and it felt like a dagger to the judge, piercing through the armor of his authority. An ember of fear surfaced in his steely gaze, a waning power that one relinquish without a fight. But as Jake gazed into the crowd's eyes, he saw something different tonight, a reflection of his own fire ignited by possibility. An exhilarating choice had been made. They stood together, ready to face whatever came next. Yet as the night stretched on, there was something unsettled between them, a question heavy like fog. How far would they push against the pathways of the established order? Would they encounter a reckoning they'd be never prepared for? Jake looked around, buoyed but anxious. A shift was in the air, and he could feel it, a tectonic shift that could either fracture their community or bring them together in ways they had never imagined. As he stood there, amid the clamor, he felt a whisper of uncertainty lace through his thoughts. What would remain of Cedar Hollow's spirit after this night? Would the fragility of change become their saving grace? Or would it shatter them altogether? The night was far from over, and as the flames of their rebellion flickered, one truth became evident: sometimes standing for what is right comes at a cost. And as he looked once more at the judge, anger simmering beneath the surface, Jake couldn't help but wonder just how fierce this fight would become. The air crackled with defiance as the crowd rallied around Jake, their voices merging into a powerful symphony that caught the judge off guard. The gavel's echo faded, but the energy pulsing through the room only intensified. Jake felt the weight of their anticipation, each person a living testament to how deeply they craved change. Then, as if sensing the waves of unity washing against the barriers of authority, a figure pushed through the crowd. It was Officer Ramirez, the local police officer who had always been respected and admired. His brow was furrowed, tension tight in his shoulders as he approached the dais where Judge Sullivan stood. The atmosphere shifted, murmurs coursed through the throng, uncertainty flickering like a flame caught in the wind. "Officer, what are you doing?" someone called uncertainly as the crowd hushed, curious about Ramirez's intent. Ramirez cleared his throat, stepping closer, eyes firmly locked on the judge. The moment felt monumental, charged with unspoken meanings. "We are not here to break the law, Your Honor. We are here to demand respect and accountability for every citizen of Cedar Hollow," he stated, his voice steady. Jake felt a wave of hope swell within him. Could this be the bridge they needed? He watched as more people turned to listen intently, drawn in by Ramirez's presence, each word merging with the collective desire for justice. Judge Sullivan's face darkened. "This is not the time or the place," he spat, waving his hand dismissively. Ramirez's expression hardened, and for a moment, silence consumed the room. Then, without warning, he stepped forward and slammed his palm against the table in front of Sullivan with a resounding crack that echoed like thunder. "You think we'll back down? You've turned a blind eye for too long." His voice was all fury and truth. The hall erupted. Gasps filled the air, And then an explosion of voices broke out, some shouting in approval, others in shock. Jake's heart raced. Was this really happening? The officer, a figure of quiet authority, defying the very legal system that had once seemed invincible? No, Sullivan shouted, his fury boiling over as he stood rigid behind the bench. You're crossing a line you can't uncross. But the outcry from the crowd only grew louder. We stand with you, Ramirez. Someone bellowed. Others joined in, chanting, their unity building momentum that felt insurmountable. Emily and Noah, eyes wide with awe, clutched each other's hands tighter, as though the force of their father's hope could harness the power unfolding before them. Jake could barely contain his own emotions. This was at a spark igniting a flame, the moment when the tide shifted against the shadows of oppression. But with that surge of exhilaration came a creeping dread. The fallout from this confrontation would surely ripple through Cedar Hollow. Would they be able to withstand it? Ramirez faced the judge, undaunted by the chaos around him. We deserve justice. It's time for you to answer to us, he declared, his voice rising above the storm. The crowd erupted again, chants intertwining a chorus of voices demanding to be heard. The judge, trembling now, straightened his tie and surveyed the sea of passionate supporters. Fear flickered behind his steely facade, but would he crumble under the pressure, or would he unleash an iron fist to quell this uprising? As the crowd surged and the stakes heightened, Jake felt a swell of determination mingle with uncertainty. It wasn't just one family they were fighting for. It was a community, a future, and a chance to rewrite their story. Would they succeed or plunge headfirst into chaos? The question loomed over them like a storm cloud, pregnant with possibilities as the night pressed on. One thought clung to the back of Jake's mind. What price would they pay to reclaim their rights? He gripped Emily and Noah's hands tighter, steeling himself for the battles that lie ahead. All around him, the crowd echoed fragments of unity and resolve. But in this new dawn of rebellion, a chilling truth began to surface. This fight was far from over, and the real test was just beginning. The crowd's roar echoed like thunder in Jake's chest. He felt the adrenaline thrumming through him, stronger than he'd ever known. Ramirez's defiance had ignited something deep within each person in the room. Instead of backing down, they surged forward, emboldened by the officer's courage. Jake's heart pounded as he squeezed Emily and Noah's hands. But their fear was replaced by a sense of belonging. Like each voice in the crowd was an anchor pulling them all together. Judge Sullivan's eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape from the tempest he had unleashed. Order, he barked, though his voice trembled. This is a court of law, not some circus. Then let us make it a court that listens. Someone yelled, prompting renewed cheers of agreement. Jake joined in, feeling the warmth of unity swell. Ramirez stood his ground. This isn't going away, Your Honor. We're demanding you take accountability. His voice rang clear, a beacon cutting through the fog of doubt. We deserve to feel safe in our own community, and right now, we don't. The law must protect us, not oppress us. Jake noticed a shift in the air. Eyes that once looked downcast were now wide and defiant. People stood taller, bracing themselves for what felt monumental and terrifying at the same time. Then, an elderly woman stepped forward from the back of the crowd. We all know someone who has suffered because of this negligence, she called out, her voice trembling at first, then gaining strength. My grandson was unfairly arrested just last month. I knew he was innocent. It's time we demand truth. The crowd's energy amplified. One voice lit a trail of others, igniting stories of their own pain and anger. Each narrative sculpted a more vibrant tapestry of injustice. Jake realized they weren't just fighting for the present. They were denying the potential for future generations to endure this same oppression. Suddenly, a feeling of solidarity enveloped Jake and the others. Shouts of agreement, mixed with calls for justice, surged louder, crashing against the judge like waves against a shore. Gazes fixed on Sullivan. The crowd awaited his next move, breath held in collective anticipation. Enough, Sullivan's face flushed with fury. The gavel came crashing down with a force that echoed through every heart in the room. I will not entertain this insubordination. But the tide had turned. Ramirez spoke above the clamor. You think fear will silence us? We are here now, and we will be heard. Jake caught a glimpse of Emily and Noah, their eyes bright with a mix of fear and awe. This was bigger than any of them could have imagined. Their father was standing firm, and the community had rallied stronger than the judge's grasp on power. He felt a pulse of hope beat through the collective heart of Cedar Hollow. In the midst of chaos, Jake's thoughts shifted. What would the next steps look like? Would they be met with hardship and retaliation? And what would that mean for his family? Fear coiled in his stomach like an uninvited guest. He turned to Emily, meeting her gaze. Whatever happens next, we'll face it together, he whispered. She nodded, squeezing his hand tighter, determination manufactured in the fires of their shared fears. Officer Ramirez's voice rose again, rallying the crowd as they surrounded the dais. We're demanding change, he shouted. Let this be the beginning. A crackling energy pulsed through each person, their voices melding into a single entity of rebellion. They would not be quieted, and they would not back down. As the tides of emotion surged, Jake felt the enormity of the battle ahead. The feeling hung thick in the air. Everyone sensed the change looming just beyond their reach, but it was clear. Cedar Hollow was not backing down, and as Jake caught a glimpse of the tentative hope sparking in their community's eyes, one question surged through the chaos. What would they sacrifice to ensure that hope became reality? The tension in the courtroom escalated, crackling with raw energy as voices blended into a harmonious plea for justice. The crowd was a living, breathing organism, each heartbeat sinking in defiance. With each shout, the symbols of power and authority began to crumble, challenging the very foundation of a system once seen as immovable. Jake felt an intensity behind him. Emily was gripping his hand harder, her small fingers digging in, reflecting her unyielding resolve. Noah, wide-eyed, took in everything with the innocence of a child too young to grasp the full weight of the moment. Can you feel it? Jake whispered to them, his voice nearly drowned out by the rising chorus. We're making history. Just then, a flicker of movement caught his eye. Officer Ramirez had stepped aside from the podium, standing tall amidst the chaos. He turned to face Judge Sullivan with a fierce determination radiating from his posture. The crowd quieted momentarily, sensing a decisive shift in the air. You may have power in this courtroom, Judge, Ramirez declared, his voice steady and unwavering. But you don't own our lives. You don't dictate our futures. You're running scared, and that's why nothing is changing. The judge's face contorted in anger, and he leaned over his bench, his gavel raised in what Jake feared would be a futile attempt to regain control of the room. But before the judge could speak, a call erupted from the crowd. All in this together. Someone yelled, and it ignited the mob anew. We want justice. Then, without warning, Ramirez took a step closer to the dais. The tension was palpable, and for a brief moment, it felt as if time suspended. Jake held his breath as he watched Ramirez's eyes lock on his Sullivan-s. With a flicker of conviction, Ramirez slammed both hands down on the wooden podium. It echoed through the hall, demanding attention. This isn't just about me or you. It's about every single person in this room. I've seen what this town can endure. I've watched too many people suffer because of the failures right before us. His voice surged as he continued. We're tired of being ignored, tired of being pushed aside. Today, we rise together. The crowd responded with a roar, more powerful than before. In that moment, the walls of the courtroom felt less like a barrier and more like an echo chamber for their determination. Judge Sullivan was visibly shaken, his arrogance faltering as Ramirez's words hung heavy in the air like thunder. That's when it happened. In an incredible display of rage and rebellion, Ramirez reached out, and with a swift movement, he slapped the judge's gavel from his hand. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A unity sparked. They stood in collective disbelief, eyes wide, hearts hammering. This broke more than just authority, it shattered years of silence. "What are you doing?" Sullivan sputtered, color draining from his face. "I'm taking a stand," Ramirez declared, his voice booming over the shocked murmurs, igniting a movement that would ripple far beyond any walls. With a boldness fueled by the crowd's energy, he continued, "We stand for change, and we won't be silenced any longer. This is just the beginning." The murmurs swelled into cheers as chants swept through the hall. Jake felt the wave of emotion crash over him. Reaching deeper than fear or doubt, it was hope, pure and undeniable. They had crossed a threshold, and now, on the other side, a new fight awaited them. Jake caught sight of Emily and Noah. Their faces mirrored his own emotions, pride mingled with a tinge of fear. Would the momentum last? And would they face retaliation for this moment of bravery? As the cheers subsided, a hush fell over the crowd, settling uneasily. Jake could feel the weight of the judge's gaze, a storm of indignation and maybe, just maybe, fear. What will happen when the dust settles? Jake wondered, wanting to shield his family from the reckoning, but knowing they had opened a door that couldn't be closed again. With the courtroom now a battleground of ideals, the fight had only just begun. What would it take for their community to stand united against the systems that had failed them so many times before? Jake's heart raced with the questions, feeling the pull of history unfolding right before their eyes. There was no turning back, but what sacrifices awaited Cedar Hollow on this united quest for justice? A heavy silence settled across the courtroom, thick with uncertainty. Jake could see it on the faces surrounding him. Some were emboldened, eyes glittering with anticipation, while others were visibly shaken, fear gripping them like a vice. Emily squeezed his hand even tighter, her knuckles pale, but he could sense the determination lighting up her spirit. Noah remained ever so still, trying to comprehend the gravity of the moment. "Can we do this?" he whispered, looking at Jake with wide, innocent eyes. "We have to try," Jake replied, an ember of resolve fueling his response. "For all of us." Judge Sullivan's face had morphed from outrage to unease. He shifted in his seat. The gavel that had commanded authority now lay discarded on the floor, a symbol of his faltering power. "Order!" he finally roared, but his voice lacked the strength it once held. The crowd remained defiant, chanting, "Justice now! Justice now!" Ramirez stood tall, basking in the energy of the room. Every word he spoke seemed to ignite another layer of courage in the people before him. "We have been afraid for too long," he boomed, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. "But no more. We deserve to be heard." The stakes were mounting. Jake sensed the urgency. This was about more than just one man standing up to injustice. It was about a community awaking from years of slumber, ready to fight for what was right. But what would it cost them? He remembered the harsh reality of the last protests, the repression faced by those who dared to challenge the status quo. Suddenly, a loud bang resonated through the courtroom, a door swinging open. A dozen officers in uniform stormed in, their expressions stern. The air crackled with tension, and the crowd's chants faltered momentarily. Jake's heart raced. What were they planning? "Stand down," one of them yelled, making the tension palpable. The crowd bristled at the command, like soldiers poised for war. "No," Ramirez shouted back, his anger resonating within the hearts of the people. "You're not going to intimidate us anymore." The officers hesitated, clearly taken aback by the fervor of the crowd. Jake felt the swell of emotion, and something inside him burst forth. "This is our home," he yelled, feeling emboldened by what Ramirez ignited. "And you will not silence us." Embarked on a collective wave of rage and hope, the crowd rallied behind him, echoing his sentiments, standing shoulder to shoulder. The officers shifted nervously, seemingly caught between duty and the undeniable pull of the people's resolve before them. Jake caught Emily's eye, a spark of belief shining bright. They wouldn't back down. They were in this together, a family in spirit and purpose. But just as victory seemed within reach, Judge Sullivan slammed his fist down once again on the bench, seeking to reclaim authority. "You're all in contempt of court," he roared, but the gavel fell silent, drowned out by renewed chants of defiance. "You think threats will work?" Ramirez shouted back. "We've lived in fear long enough." In that moment, Jake understood the deep-rooted fear in his community, the fear of repercussions, of losing everything. But something stirred a flicker of hope. They could change the narrative. They had to, with every beat of the chant echoing in his ears. Suddenly Jake saw a path unfolding. What if this moment was just the beginning? What if they could build something new, a community rebuilt on trust and unity? As the crowd swelled around him, an urgent question lingered. What would happen if they won? What would a world free from fear look like? As for Officer Ramirez, he stood firm, but Jake sensed that this single act of rebellion could push them all into the unknown. The question now was, how far were they all willing to go to fight for what was right? In that storm of emotion and uncertainty, the next chapter awaited them all, teetering on the edge of hope and impending challenges. Would they face the wrath of the system or emerge victorious? And would justice be served, or would the fight just ignite a deeper struggle? Noise filled the room, a cacophony of voices rising to meet the tension in the air. The crowd held their collective breath, minds racing as they faced the men in blue, who were now on their side. Jake's heart hammered against his ribcage. This was an unpredictable shift swelled unexpectedly upon them. "Stay back," another officer shouted, stepping forward, his hand resting on the butt of his holstered weapon, face hardened with that all-too-familiar determination. The tension was so thick it felt like a physical force, ready to snap at any moment. "Let them go," shouted Ramirez, whose very presence seemed to galvanize the crowd. He stepped ahead, shoulders squared, eyes blazing. "We've all suffered. We've all been silenced. Today is not for you to impose fear upon us." The officers hesitated, glancing at each other, and in that brief moment of uncertainty, Jake saw a flicker of doubt in their eyes. Maybe they weren't all heartless enforcers. Maybe fear had shackled them too, just like the people they had sworn to protect. From the back, a voice rang out. "Stand with us." A woman, her face painted with the tenacity of a warrior, stood defiantly. Other voices soon followed, echoing her sentiment until the courtroom was a tempest of resolve. Jake stood tall among them, feeling something swell beyond just anger, a fierce bond of community forming. Suddenly, the door creaked open wider, and in walked Officer Ramirez, holding his head high, the very embodiment of defiance. He took a step forward, eyes fixed on the assembly and Judge Sullivan, whose face was a mask of fury and shock. "Enough," Ramirez thundered. "Today, justice will be redefined. I won't be a pawn anymore." He had crossed an invisible line that separated duty from heart, and Jake felt a wave of warmth spread throughout the crowd. As Judge Sullivan began to rise, his gavel shimmering ominously in the air, Ramirez put his hand down decisively, stopping him. "You will not silence us. We have rights. You don't get to strip us of our voices any longer." A ripple of excitement surged through the crowd, igniting their frustrations into a raging fire. The chant "Justice Now" roared louder. In that moment, a united front began to form, fueled by the courage of a single police officer standing against the system that had crumbled under the weight of its own arrogance. But Jake saw something darker brewing around the edges of the courtroom, a dozen officers shifting in their boots, unease creeping in. There were those who wouldn't take this uprising lightly. "Don't be misled," begged one officer, a grim warning lacing his voice. "You don't understand the consequences of what you're stirring." His words hung heavy, a grim reminder of the dangers that lay ahead. "Bring it on," Ramirez challenged, his demeanor blazing with a fierce determination. "We're ready." The crowd surged forward, emboldened. Jake felt Emily's hand searching for his, their fingers intertwining tightly. He could no longer hear the fear. All that echoed now was courage. This was not just about justice, it was about liberation. Yet in the back of his mind, doubts loomed. What if this ended badly? What if they lost everything they'd fought for? The thought made his heart sink. Would this newfound strength crumble under the weight of retaliation? As Jake scanned the sea of faces filled with hope and determination, the knife edge between victory and disaster hovered precariously above them. He sensed the tipping point approaching, the moment when fear transformed into inception. Would they all stand together against the fallout, or would they fall apart at the seams? The only certainty pulsated through the air. Electrifying and intoxicating change was coming. As though fate itself hung in the balance, Jake wondered what price they'd pay for this bravery, and if they'd be able to withstand the storm that was about to descend. The courtroom stood poised on the brink, but would they be ready for the consequences? The air was electric, charged with a wild energy that felt both invigorating and terrifying. Jake stood at the heart of it all, surrounded by the crowd, each face reflecting a blend of anxiety and hope. He could sense the surge of unity pushing them forward, but his heart still raced with uncertainty. "Justice now," the crowd chanted, their voices a tidal wave cresting over the barriers of fear. Ramirez had stoked the fire, but now he stood firm amidst the storm, a lone beacon for countless others. They'd gathered here for more than just justice. They were demanding respect, acknowledgement, and the right to be heard. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from somewhere near the back, sending shockwaves through the crowd. Jake turned, his heart racing. A metal chair had been thrown across the room, sparking an explosion of chaos. People gasped, and several officers instinctively tightened their grips on their weapons. "It's just a chair," someone shouted, anger mixing with fear. "We want T back down." But the officers weren't so sure. Jake could see the indecision clouding their eyes, and fear began to creep back in. Irrational echoes of doubt rattled his mind. What if today wasn't the day for change? What if it was just a burst of emotion that would extinguish under pressure? "Stay in line," shouted one officer, his voice strained as he struggled to maintain control. "You're only making this worse." But there was no stopping the tide. The chant grew louder, sweeping through the crowd like a powerful current. "Justice now! Justice now!" Then, it happened. In the midst of the chaos, Officer Ramirez stepped away from the front, moving deliberately towards Judge Sullivan, who remained frozen in shock, gavel still clutched in hand. The silence that ensued was deafening. Every eye turned to watch. Jake's breath caught in his throat as tension curled in the pit of his stomach. Ramirez drew close, and with a sudden, shocking motion, he raised a hand. Then the unexpected happened. In a swift, decisive action, he slapped the gavel out of the judge's hand, sending it skittering across the floor like a thrown stone. The sound rang out, echoing against the walls, a resounding declaration of defiance. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Jake's heart raced, fear mingling with exhilaration. What had he just witnessed? Ramirez's bold action had crossed a boundary, and the crowd, still processing the shock, erupted into a thunderous cheer. Silencing voices of years past, Ramirez shouted, "This is our moment. No more will we sit under the judgment of a broken system. This is about dignity. This is about respect. Today, we reclaim our power." Jake felt a heated rush wash over him. The energy in the room shifted. It was as if they had crossed a threshold. But almost instantly, Jake's exhilaration wavered. Was this too bold? Would the officers retaliate? Retraining his eyes on both Ramirez and Judge Sullivan, their expressions were like a study in contrast. The judge stunned into silence, jaw tightening as fury flickered behind his eyes. Ramirez stood proud, a warrior in a battlefield. Jake's pulse thundered. This was at the moment of truth, the real test of courage. Would the crowd rise up or scatter in fear? Would they be met with violence? Or could this turn into a defining moment in their history? Across the courtroom, the atmosphere grew thick with anticipation. Would they stand soldier-like by Ramirez, declaring the fight for justice? Or crumble under the weight of their fears? As the question hung heavily in the air, Jake held onto Emily's hand, willing strength and courage through the connection. With all that they faced leading up to this point, could today truly change their lives forever? The room held its breath, awaiting the next move, but what would that move be? The courtroom stood frozen, thick with tension, as whispers of shock reverberated off the walls. The air crackled with a new energy, ignited by Officer Ramirez's bold acted declaration that shattered the facade of authority. Jake watched, heart racing, lost in a whirlwind of emotions mingling with fear and hope. Is this really happening? He thought, as he squeezed his children's hands tighter. Justice now, the crowd roared, their voices a collective heartbeat, thrumming with newfound life. It felt like an electric current coursing through the room, strong, unyielding, and unmistakably alive. Judge Sullivan's face blanched, anger and disbelief mingling in his eyes. "You'll regret this. You're in contempt," he shouted, grasping for his authority with a tremor that betrayed his fear. But the crowd was no longer intimidated. They leaned into each other, emboldened by the sheer audacity of their shared longing for change. Then, unexpectedly, a powerful silence fell over them. Ramirez stepped forward, the emblem of hope for their broken system. "We are tired of empty threats and silence. Today we take back our power." His voice rang like a bell, clear and resounding, striking every heart in the room. The crowd erupted in furious applause and cheers, feeding off his courage as though it were their lifeblood. Jake felt Emily shift beside him, her youthful optimism radiating through their clasped hands. "Dad, we can win this, right?" she said, her eyes sparkling with belief. "Yes, sweetheart," he replied, the tremor in his voice betraying a blend of excitement and fear. "We have to believe." In that moment, something stirred deep within him, a surge of determination. This was more than just about justice for one individual. This was about unfinished stories, families broken, future stifled. "Let our stories speak," he bellowed, surprising even himself. The words felt like a call to arms, ripping through the veil of uncertainty. People around him nodded, faces illuminating with fierce light. A woman stepped forward, her voice rising through the chaos. "My son was wrongfully jailed. He deserves justice just like everyone here." Cheering gave way to stories, voices intertwining, a tapestry of pain and resilience emerging in a sacred chorus of truth. As Jake stood, he could feel the weight lifting from their collective shoulders. Each story shared was a brick pulled from a wall that had imprisoned them in fear. The chant of justice now morphed into a rhythmic heartbeat echoing through the hall, the heartbeat of a community that refused to be silenced any longer. But as the fervor of the crowd grew, so did Jake's trepidation. Retaliation loomed like a shadow over them. Would this awakening ignite a new wave of violence? Or would it pave the way toward a brighter future? He caught a glimpse of the officers, some visibly uncomfortable, others resolute in their loyalty to the judge. "Where do you stand?" He wanted to call out to them. "Stand with us," a voice cried from the crowd, and Jake felt that invitation reverberate from his chest. A pivotal moment hung in the air. Would the police officer's bravery compel others to join this movement, or would it pull them back into complacency? Suddenly, another officer stepped forward, this one visibly shaken. "We're all human," she shouted, her eyes scanning the crowd, offering a lifeline amid the chaos. "There are many of us who believe in justice. Let us work together." Their words were like wildfire, igniting the crowd's resolve. The front lines of the courthouse transformed into a solidarity bridge, blurring the lines between enforcers and civilians. Jake locked eyes with Emily and Noah, the hope illuminating their faces clear as day. But then, a loud bang, a door bursting open. More officers flooded in, some with expressions of anger, others hesitation. "Stand down," one barked. The tiny flicker of fear crept back in, threatening the momentum they had built. But in the face of that fear, Ramirez stood taller. "Bring it," he retorted, voice fierce. "We stand together. No one is going to silence us now." As the officers began to divide the crowd, Jake took a deep breath. Fear surged through him again, but he couldn't let it lead this time. Fueled by the faith of his children, he raised his voice. "This isn't just a protest. It's our right to be heard. We deserve love and justice." As the words left his lips, it felt like a wave of solid truth washed over the gathering. They weren't just faces in a crowd anymore. They were warriors in their individual struggles, turned into a brigade of hope for tomorrow. Together, the crowd echoed back, a surge of collective strength flowing through the air like a gust of wind sweeping away despair. And in that shimmering moment, clarity washed over Jake. The path ahead would be fraught with challenges, but they had started a transformation that could reverberate through generations. It was a beginning, a chance to reshape history and reclaim lives lost to indifference. He looked into the eyes of his children. He felt an unwavering conviction stirring within. It starts here, he thought, heart beating with powerful resolve. This was not just a fight for justice anymore. It was a rebirth of Cedar Hollow. And through the flame of unity, they will rise together, forging a better future, fiercely defending what is right. Together, no longer afraid. And as the crowd rallied around their unified call, they stepped forward with a shared heart, their voices merging into one, a resolute anthem. The dawn of a new day had begun, and Cedar Hollow would never be the same again. Let this be your call to action. You need to subscribe now to the channel to witness the upcoming exclusive stories that will keep your spirits soaring. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and make our voices heard. Comment below your reactions and feelings about this heart-opening ending. And don't wait not even one more second to share this with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation. Together, let us spread the power of change.